Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Thanks.
So Yul,
So Gideon.
for all the nice things that Paul just said about me, I think the coolest thing about me is that I get to go and tell my sister-in-law, who had a big crush on you when you won Survivor, back when you had six-pack abs.
Oh, dude.
That I got to hang out with you. Can you take your shirt off again for us? Please,
no,
come on.
no. I don't want to spoil
Really
everyone's
cool.
appetite. We're having
the
a nice
Secretary
meal.
General would love to see your shirt off. I think it would be great. It would be great.
Gideon, you know what that means? Like, it means I can never meet your sister-in-law. Because I was on Survivor 10 years, 2 kids, and about 1,000 hamburgers ago. So that six-pack is long gone. Hey, I just really want to thank you for coming here tonight. And
My pleasure.
Honestly, I couldn't think of another person who'd be more deserving of the Trailblazer recognition. I mean, seriously, you've been the not just the first Korean American president, not even the first Asian American president, but the first president of color of any team in the history of the National Football League, which is amazing. I mean, Gideon's not broken doors just for us, but for doors that have been historically closed to all people of color. And on top of that, Paul mentioned this as well, but I mean, you were the CFO of the first 2 internet companies to ever reach 1 billion active users. So obviously, my first question to you is going to be, would you ever be interested in being the CFO of the Council of Korean Americans and helping us reach a billion Korean Americans?
Sign me up.
Hey, so for those of you who don't know, Gideon and I have been friends for the last few years. But I'd say it wasn't until pretty recently that we've really gotten to like a deeper level in our friendship. And it's a level that I wouldn't have thought of early on when I first met you. And I think it's probably for reasons that would be surprising for a lot of people. So when I first met Gideon, I'd already heard about him. He's sort of a legend in Silicon Valley. And I remember when I first heard about him and I knew I was going to meet him, I was just like really intimidated, right? Because there's this guy who's been like so successful. I've heard you speak at other places and you're like funny and you're articulate and you have like so many like people that you know. And I always thought of you as sort of like that ultimate success story, the ultimate insider. And for me, like whenever I've been confronted with people like that, it's always made me feel really insecure. Because for me, when I was growing up, I got bullied. I always felt like an outsider, marginalized. And some of you have heard me talk about this before, but when I was a kid, I think a lot of those feelings led to like deeper challenges for me, right? So when I was a kid, I had like severe OCD. I had this condition known as social sweating, where I'd essentially have a panic attack anytime I felt like I was in front of people, and I'd sweat uncontrollably. And when I was a kid, I'd been bullied, where in the bathroom, I got attacked by a bunch of kids. And for years after that, and to this day, I still have trouble going to the bathroom in front of other people. It's a condition called pareidosis. And I've always felt really uncomfortable in the spotlight. Like whenever people have kind of like held me up as like someone like gets on a stage, I never felt like I deserved it. And it's funny, it wasn't until I actually met you that I heard someone who understood that story and felt the same way. And when you started telling me about like your background, the way that you got brought up, the way that you felt like an outsider, and to this day that how you still feel like an outsider, like that just blew me away. So we were thinking tonight, like there are lots of great speeches from lots of like really amazing people, but I thought I'd want to share with all of you out there some of what Gideon and I have talked about, like the person that I've gotten to know, and the person that it's weird, like even though like I've gotten to know him better as a person, like I feel like he's like my big brother, right? Like he's the guy that I can look to, and he's not a role model because like he's done these amazing things, but it's because he's gone through these same things and gotten to a place where he hasn't let it beat him. And that I think is the really amazing and inspirational thing that I've taken away from our friendship. So let me just start. Like, tell me a little bit about how you grew up. I mean, you grew up in the Deep South, and like, why did you feel like an outsider?
Yeah, before I get, thanks, Yul. That's incredibly nice of you to say those things. Before I get started, I'd like to just say, if I may, I know we have limited time, but I'm incredibly honored to receive this award from CKA. There is no such thing as a Trailblazer type award without the support of incredible family members. And my wife Susie, who is here with me, my lifelong supporter and friend, who has helped me get there, as well as my mother and father and my brother, who have been there with me since the beginning. And as Yul said, we all grew up in some way, shape, or form as 1.5 or second generation Korean Americans. and felt like outsiders in some way, shape, or form. You cannot get to any level of achievement or even feeling good about yourself without that. So look, I'll tell you, as Yul said, my parents and I, we immigrated from South Korea to Nashville, Tennessee when I was 1 year old in 1972. Let me tell you a funny story. So I took my wife, Susie, for the first time. She grew up in Los Angeles. I took her for the first time to go and visit Nashville. And we went to my favorite breakfast restaurant called Cracker Barrel. I don't know if they have that out here, Cracker Barrel. Yeah, Cracker Barrel. And here's what was cool. She leans over to me about halfway through the breakfast and says, "Everybody is white." And then she says, "Why is everybody looking at us?" And when I looked around, I realized a couple things. One is that she was right. But more importantly, number two, given where I came from and how I grew up, that's just the way it was. It was totally normal. On the other hand, where Susie grew up, you can grow up in parts of Los Angeles or New York City and speak only Korean for your whole life. Never had to speak one word of English. From a early stage in my life, I was faced with the harsh reality that the world on a good day is very race aware. On a bad day, it can be downright racist. Right? Let me tell you one more story about growing up. When I was in high school, there were three of us that were all great pals. Myself, an African American, and a Caucasian. And we went on a road trip in high school. And we stopped by a convenience store. You guys won't even believe this story. We stopped by a convenience store, and the two minorities got out and went to the car on the way out. The Caucasian guy came out and said, like he'd seen a ghost. And we look at him and say, "Hey, what happened?" He says this. He says, "The clerk just asked me, why am I hanging out with those two N-words, myself and the African American?" And he actually urged him to go to a KKK meeting with him that weekend. Wow. This is in my lifetime. Let me give you a little bit of historical perspective here. In 1972, this may seem like it was a million years ago, but 1972, when my mom and my dad came here from Korea with me, that was 7 years after the civil rights marches in Selma, Alabama. That was 4 hours from our house. That didn't sink in. Let me say that a different way. Think about how vivid your memories are of things that happened in 2009, okay? From today, 2009. Now, go back, when we came to America, that's how vivid it was that people were getting beaten to death fighting for civil rights. You know, it's this feeling of being an outsider that to this day drives me, Yul. And I gotta tell you that what you just described is interesting, and it's, look, Yul and I talked last week about what to say to you guys this evening, and we thought about, do we have the standard fluffy, ask questions and make ourselves feel good about each other, or do we go deep? And do we go deep and talk about the things that really matter and affect all of us? And I'll tell you, this sense that even though in some way, shape, or form, the two of us have gotten into the front door, I still feel like that front door is not available to me. I still feel like I've got to go through the back door, the side door, any other way, that being a trailblazer really is the only path that you can take. Yeah. And then, to close, I would say, though, that, even though this feeling of being an outsider is the story of my childhood and the story of being a kid in the deep South in the 70s and 80s, I feel incredibly blessed that my parents decided to come to America, and more importantly, go into the South, where getting through that by yourself allows you to then have this perspective where nothing else becomes that difficult as far as race relations throughout your life.
Yeah. Dude, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Gideon. Gideon, you're talking about going through doors, going through the front door, going around. Obviously, one of the biggest doors you got through was in the major sports league, NFL. Like, what was that like for you? Like, how was it like? Did you feel welcomed? Like, did you feel like you had finally made it once you got in?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I'd say that, look, I'll be honest with you. Growing up in the South, I love football. So what was it like to shatter that glass ceiling? It was totally sweet. Freaking sweet. I'd say though, I don't know if that was a bad word to use at a very formal thing like this, but I'd say though that I didn't even know, honestly, that I had become the first minority president in the NFL until many months later, when I picked up a diversity pamphlet that was published by the NFL, and I read my name in there. So I certainly didn't seek it out, but what I will tell you is that I'm really proud that we Koreans made it first, that we Korean Americans made it first. That is fantastic. And I'll tell you that I really hope that some of you parents out there, especially the old school parents like my parents, when you actually hear that your son or daughter does not want to go and be a doctor or a lawyer, and may want to go into sports, or may want to go into business, or may want to go into something else, or even starting a company, or going to Silicon Valley and joining this little small startup that nobody's ever heard of called YouTube. It's okay. Let them do it. Let them chase their passions. And the good news is that path has been blazed in front of you for all you guys. There are several people in here that I think are college age, high school age, and just coming out and starting in their careers. And if Yul and I can lay the groundwork for you a little bit, this guy won Survivor. This guy was like 100 most beautiful people kind of guy. These are very non-traditional doctor or lawyer type things, and if we can do it, everybody else can.
All right, I got one last question for you. So it's interesting. When I actually asked Gideon that we wanted to give him this recognition as a Trailblazer, he declined. He actually said, I don't want this. And I had to twist his arm to do it. And he told me he didn't want the recognition, he didn't want to come here, he didn't want the spotlight on him. And like, I understand why, but I was just wondering if you could tell us, like, why was that? Like, I mean, finally, like, we had to twist it, like, dude, it's gonna be weird if you come here and everyone gets an award and you don't get an award. Like, you know, that's gonna be kind of an awkward moment. But why?
Well, I've got two answers, Yul, and I think one is tough to say and one is easy to say. The easy to say thing is that, I don't know, I still feel young, even though my wife likes to make fun of me for being middle-aged at this point, a lot of gray hair. I feel like these types of awards are given to people at the end of their careers, ex post looking back on them. And look, I hope that there's a lot of career left in me. I hope that I still have, you know, maybe the two of us can come and talk about something in 20 years from now at the same event. The harder answer, though, that is a lot more personal, and like I'll share this with my new 600 best friends here, is, look, this feeling of being an outsider, this feeling of growing up always looking in, always wondering why am I not at that main table? Why have I not gotten a job through the front door by just applying over, you know, the standard channels instead of having to pull strings and like hustle and break through the doors? I don't like this much attention placed on me for accomplishment. I'd rather that just be on a resume on some LinkedIn website or whatever. I can speak for itself. Paul, you can Google me, it's all good. As opposed to being up here, exposed to everybody, talking about being a trailblazer. I guess I worry sometimes that maybe you see right through me, right? That maybe you actually see that, you know, that you and I were looking at each other prior to coming up here, and we were both totally nervous. We were both like shaking to death. We were both trying to figure out like how many times has each other gone to the bathroom before coming up here. 5.
Yeah.
4?
Yeah, 5.
5, yeah, 5. We're tied. And I gotta tell you, it's because of things like that that I don't like placing this much attention on myself for awards and such. But to close, I think we're out of time, but so to close, I'd say though that what Yul and I talked about last week as to why we want to do this is that maybe, just maybe, if you look at our bios and think that somehow or another that we don't have the same problems that everybody in this room has, maybe now you know that we do have these same problems, and sometimes you might be able to push right through them. That's really why I didn't want to take this. I don't like talking about this kind of stuff in front of 600 people with all their cameras rolling in front of the Secretary General and the Ambassador. These are very personal things to say in front of very big people. But that's why I took it, and that's why you twisted my arm. So.
Hey, thank you. Gideon, I want to thank you for coming up here, for sharing. I mean, again, I've always looked to Gideon as someone that I just like, he was like on another rarefied plane, but the thing that I really take inspiration from is that like he's gone through these things and he hasn't let it beat him, and I think that's like a great narrative for our community, right? Like we're not coming through the front door, but we find a way to push ahead, overcome our challenges, and to create a door for ourselves. So thank you for doing that, Gideon. Wish you the best.